Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of Post-Secondary Outcomes, the Universal Tier 1 supports that we're sponsoring through the Office of Special Education Services at the Department of Education. Your presenters today will be Ann Moore, Kim Watkins, and Chris Napier, and we will be providing you with a great deal of information in this session regarding resources and so on. So we hope you get what you need from this session. The post-secondary outcome team members you'll see on the screen, I'm not going to go through the whole list. Most of you will recognize a number of those names, but we do have people from data and from finance and IT support, as well as the program people that are involved. And today you'll be hearing from those program people. Thank you very much for joining us today.
There are, as you all know, a number of federal indicators linked with post-secondary outcomes. They're listed here. Graduation rate and dropout rate sort of go hand in hand. Transition through indicator 13 and the post-secondary outcomes through indicator 14. There have been some changes recently in how that data is gathered and reported, and you'll hear about all of that separately. But that's where the post-secondary outcomes team focus group focused in our efforts to provide the Tier 1 supports. There are a couple of other indicators that are aligned to post-secondary outcomes, but they don't directly report post-secondary outcome data. Those indicators are indicator 3B, the pieces that deal specifically with end-of-course assessments, and then school-aged least restrictive environment. The post-secondary outcomes team developed a root cause analysis and a system of universal Tier 1 supports for you because we realize that schools in South Carolina are not one-size-fits-all schools, and that as a state, we value local control, we value flexibility, and we wanted to give you as many resources as we could so that you could provide what you need to in your own districts. You are the best group to be aware of your students' needs, of what resources are available in your community, of what resources are available in your district. And we don't want to remove that responsibility and that control from the districts. As we developed our root cause analysis and different tiers of supports, we tried to be sure that we used consistent organization and terminology throughout the post-secondary outcome documents. We wanted to make sure that if we used a word in the post-secondary outcome root cause analysis, you could then find that same word in our essential program components document, in our framework, so that you could find easily all the information related to that particular concept. So we felt consistency, both in how the forms were organized and in the terminology we used, were very important. We also structured it so that you can assess your own programs in each predictor category and program characteristic, and that's the information you would use for your continuous improvement plan. The strategies for improvement that you will put in your improvement plan should align with the priorities based on the result of your most recent determinations. And you would again identify those further through the root cause analysis. You can use the essential program components guidance document for greater detail about the kinds of skills that fall into each area, because we realized as we developed this that there are so many skills that are part of good transition programs nationwide, but not every district needs or should have every single component. That is contingent on the needs and the students in your area. But we did want to include some information about as many of those as we could, so that you could choose, you could see, and you could determine if you needed to add components or not to your overall transition program. As we organized it, the predictor categories are the broader categories of the root cause analysis. Those are career development, policy, student skills, and collaborative systems. You can see the program characteristics within each predictor category. For example, in career development, the first program characteristic is career awareness, and that's what we'll focus on a little bit today. The other areas are the main areas, the major areas of every single transition program. And the program characteristics that are listed here are smaller categories, if you will, of characteristics. And then if you went from the document, from the root cause analysis to the essential programs components, you would find even smaller sub areas within each characteristic.
Let's take a look at the Universal Tier 1 Supports spreadsheet. This is a spreadsheet of supports by the 4 overarching predictor categories that Ann alluded to: the career development, policy, student skills, and collaborative systems, and those program characteristics and supports within each. To improve post-secondary outcomes, it is important to consider consistent organization and terminology with the root cause analysis and think about where those gaps in programming may be. Then those supports within those overarching categories can be utilized to improve post-secondary outcomes. The overall universal supports are intended to provide LEAs and SOPs across the state with a consistent message and best practices to support diverse students, which can be utilized across all tiers. Let's take a look at the Universal Tier 1 supports. These are resources, and as you could see with the resource locator to the left of the page, we have grade level, the subject content area, the focus group, perhaps resource type, and those essential components and those skills necessary for post-secondary outcomes. Then you will have the various supports as you see listed to the right side of the page. The National Center on Intensive Intervention will provide those evidence-based practices, interventions that you could utilize within your program. And this link is not live yet, but it should be forthcoming. Let's take a look at the phases and how to use the Universal Tier 1 supports. First, to diagnose. These are phases that we want to improve programming. And what does the data tell us? 2, select strategies. What strategies will fit the gaps for improvement? 3, planning for improvement. How will we plan for improvement using those strategies? 4th, implementing the plan. Ensuring practice is consistently being implemented. 5th, monitor and evaluate. With any intervention, monitor and analyze the data. And then, of course, lastly, we want to consider perhaps revising for momentum or sustainability and adjusting the intervention as warranted. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into the phases. Phase 1, diagnose. A comprehensive review and analysis of data should be conducted to establish a baseline, and this will provide the foundation for understanding of the LEA SOP strengths and weaknesses and serves as a basis for selecting evidence-based strategies and programs to improve student achievement. The needs assessment, or the root cause analysis, the RCA, serves as a formative assessment measure in the school improvement process. It will provide documented evidence and specific information regarding leadership, teaching strategies, learning strategies, and to be able to review those instructional and leadership practices, and also school climate and community engagement, as these are also important. This will result into a more of a comprehensive picture of the LEA SOP strengths and weaknesses, and will provide a clear articulation of those improvement priorities. Phase 2, selecting strategies. The LEA SOP teams identify priority areas for improvement based on the needs assessment and establish goals and strategies for those identified priorities. Thinking about what are those most important problems that we need to identify first, and then limiting those to just a few will allow the LEAs to focus their efforts. And then once those priorities are identified, the team can work together to understand that root cause that may be looking at that, what needs to be, with interventions needed to be provided. The LEA, the SOP team select strategies such as the evidence-based practices to support improvement in those priorities. Resources may include the IRIS Center of Evidence-Based Practice Summaries, What Works Clearinghouse, and the National Center for Intensive Intervention, just to name a few. Phase 3, Plan for Improvement. The LEA, SOP, in collaboration with OSES, will develop an action plan to address those established priorities. These priorities should have clear and measurable goals with the use of evidence-based interventions. For example, if the school identifies that attendance may be a problem that could affect the graduation rate as a deficit, this may be a top priority, and the school improvement team should state a goal, having a clear target, indicator, and milestone date. An effective goal could be, for example, to increase student attendance rates to 94% per week by December 14th, 2020. And therefore, you'll have an indicator, your target, that 94%, and then a timeline in December. During this phase, you will want to identify those needed resources, outlining professional development, and developing a plan for monitoring implementation of the plan. So what would be important would be to consider and determine that evidence-based strategy to ensure alignment with the assigned intervention. Think about ownership. Assign those persons responsible for each strategic action. Determine if those identified strategies require funding, that source of funding, and how funding will be sustained. And think about professional development required and those systems and structures needed to be in place to support, sustain, and monitor for improvement. Of course, we will support you along the way. Phase 4, Implementing the Plan. Strategies identified for each plan or goal in the plan are implemented during this phase. It's important to engage stakeholders, ensuring fidelity of implementation, and using effective systems to support implementation. So you want to determine that process for working with stakeholders to support and execute the implementation of the improvement strategies and identify the necessary behaviors for improvement. You want to determine a process to monitor the fidelity of implementation of each improvement strategy and think about what systems should be used to support that implementation of the plan. And this may include systems used to determine professional development, the analysis of data, and those instructional strategies for intervention. The OSES will provide support to ensure the ongoing fidelity of implementation and technical assistance when required. Phase 5, Monitor and Evaluate. Data will be collected on specific targets established by the action plan and analyzed to determine progress toward those set targets. Data may indicate progress toward the goal, a lack of progress or change, or the negative impact of change. There may need to be adjustments along the way, continuing with the strategy, abandoning the strategy, or modifying the strategy based on the data. Results may indicate progress toward a goal, a lack of change, and based upon the results, determine to stay the course or change the strategy. Adequate progress may mean that there may need to be no changes. So if progress is being made, you want to continue that course. For those districts who may be in SOPs that are in Tier 2, Tier 3, you will be required to provide that evidence of the rate of progress to OSES during this phase, but we will assist you along the way. Phase 6, Revise for Momentum or Sustainability. Outcomes of this internal analysis of progress towards set targets in the action plan are examined during this phase to determine the success of improvement activities, programs, and strategies. Focus should be placed on maintenance and sustainability at this point. Based on the outcomes, the plan can be revised, following steps 1 through 5 to ensure continued improvement or to develop desired momentum. And this planning cycle, even though it's a series of separate phases, but certainly can overlap. So we want to take a look at maybe some practical ways that we can use Universal Tier 1 supports.
The PSO team wants to give a hands-on practical way on how to use the predictor categories and the program characteristics in a classroom setting. And to do so, we chose the predictor category of career development and the characteristic of career awareness. Our PSO team has created a lesson that outlines career counseling, and we've given it a name of what are career clusters. And we've also given it a duration of 30 minutes, which would be plenty enough time to cover it in one classroom setting. We've linked some South Carolina college and career readiness standards and dispositions to the lesson. As you notice here, we have ELA in our setting with this, so that way it could go across the curriculum and they wouldn't have to span out a chunk of time in a classroom day. The activity type can be done in a small group or an individual setting. And the highlighted information, we have the Universal Tier 1 resources, so that goes back to the website that we covered earlier, and you can find all of these resources inside of that resource locator. 3 that we have highlighted today is the South Carolina Department of Education Career Cluster Guide, which talks about the career clusters in detail. We also have a great resource called Career One Stop. This resource lists all 16 career clusters that are offered inside of South Carolina, and it gives jobs inside of the cluster that students can research and gives them a brief virtual tour of what that student would do inside of that career. We also have resources on the advanced CTE site, which goes into more detail on career clusters. If you notice, we also have works to be completed after class. So these are done 10 minutes. This is where the teacher would give students instructions how to access the Career One Stop, and site noted in resources in the section above. The students would select one of the clusters that would interest them. They could watch at least 3 of the cluster videos that you help select, and the students need to make notes about the occupation or skills that are most interesting to them. At the end of that, they can discuss these at the next meeting with their vocational rehab staff or a parent. We've also created a rubric and assessment for teachers. They can look at 3 clusters and document them by the student. We've listed possible accommodations that may be needed inside of the classroom. Some suggestions for accommodations could be something like creating a handout for students to document the career information. A teacher could also pause a video after each career cluster description to allow time for note-taking or clarification. We also want to activate prior knowledge inside of the lesson. You may want to ask students to identify a career field that may be interesting in pursuing. And there's also things on there where students can ask to identify what they may think will be interesting inside of that particular career or occupational field. Since it is under an ELA class setting, there is vocabulary development that can be researched. Some terms that we just threw in, some quick ones, were occupation and career cluster. That way we know that the students have a clear definition of occupation and career cluster. You can introduce the terms to students and have them discuss what they know about each one of these words. You could write a simple definition of each as a group or individually. To activate active learning, we give that a 15-minute duration. You can provide each student with career clusters a handout and have one displayed so you can identify each one as it's being discussed. So you give a deeper dive into the career cluster itself. You can tell students you will identify the cluster on the handout you are displaying so they can quickly find it on their individual handout. Then you could ask the students to place a check mark beside each career cluster that has some level of interest for them and modify it as they see need fit. Then you could watch the videos from the YouTube account, which is under the Career One Stop, that talks about the 16 career clusters. and give a video introduction to each one of these career clusters so the students get a better in-depth dive of each career cluster. At the end, they can reflect and they can access the Career One-Stop videos at the link noted in the Universal Tier 1 resource section of this lesson and demonstrate for the student how they will complete the activity after the session. Show the student the cluster list and click on at least 2 of the cluster areas demonstrating where to find the videos at. So they're demonstrating where you can find the videos inside of the Universal Tier 1 resource section. That way they can take it from the classroom out into the home or to the work world. And you just want to make sure that each student has at least marked 3 clusters and written a few ideas for that specific occupation for each one of the clusters. The PSO team would like to give further clarification on the Career One-Stop website, and we've brought that up for you, and we're going to show you how you can explore those careers from the website. So if you see the purple box that says Explore Careers, we can click on that and bring up And More. And you'll notice in the green section where it says Explore Careers at a Glance, we can click on Career Videos in the middle column. And it's going to bring up a list of the 16 career clusters that South Carolina offers for our students. For this example, we are going to click on Architecture and Construction. If you notice, there's a big list of jobs inside of this career cluster, and for this example, click on Carpenters. It brings the example of what a carpenter does, and if you notice on the left-hand column, it shows you the average pay a carpenter makes across the U.S. And we also clarify to the students that this is not their starting salary. This is an average of a carpenter that's been working over several years. So you may want to clarify that with the student. And they can also click Learn More, which would break that into more detailed information, such as what state they're working in. Below that, you see the career outlook of a carpenter, and it shows that this is a very bright future and new job opportunities are very likely. Below that, it gives the typical training that a carpenter would need. And this shows that you need a high school diploma or an equivalent to be a carpenter. On the right-hand side, you will notice a carpenter career video. This gives a quick description of the skills that are needed and some of the common things that a carpenter might see in a workday. The videos range anywhere between 1 to 3 minutes, and they give a really clear picture for a visual learner on to see what a carpenter does in a day. If you notice at the bottom, there's also a video transcript explaining exactly what is inside of the video, so you can see that.
The post-secondary outcomes team at the Office of Special Education Services will support the districts and state-operated programs in any way we can, but by helping build capacity and infrastructure so that all your students can achieve whatever post-secondary activities and goals, education, training, competitive employment, that you and they have decided are what's important to them. Those will be measured by indicators 1, 2, 13, and 14 of the State Performance Plan and Annual Performance Report, which is, of course, the SPP APR. We are available to support you and your PSO support team within the district, and you can contact us at the email address listed here, Special Education Services PSO @ed.sc.gov. Thank you for participating, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help you in your districts.